Hi everybody, my name is Jo and I love life. Today I'm going to be talking about the birth story of little Miles. We had a boy named Miles. We named him Miles Neville, and he was born on Tuesday the 24th of May this year, obviously at 1:33 p.m. His birth was a lot different to what I had really hoped. I tried not to get in my head about having a birth plan because it can be really traumatic for women to set themselves up thinking that their birth is going to go a certain way because they've decided that that's how they want it, and then things happen and there's not a lot that you can do to change it. Still good to be informed and to research how you would like things to go, what kind of pain stuff you would like to use, whether more natural or medicated methods, and just to be aware of what can kind of go happen in sort of like the most simplest sense, I suppose, of what sort of normally happens, what complications normally happen, and what methods are used to help them. I felt like I had gone into it pretty wide open. I really wanted to try natural pain methods first. I really didn't want to, I was kind of a bit ambiguous about using gas. I really didn't want an epidural, but I was kind of open considering that I could have had a labour that could have gone for like 12 hours or more, or like 36 hours. You hear about these women that it happens to. So I was pretty open to that. If it's something where it needed, my body needed a break and I needed a break, then I was happy to get it, but I really didn't want to just sort of straight away. The one thing though that I hadn't really thought about is induction pre to my due date. So my due date was on the 21st of May, and I had thought about induction before, but in like a post due date sense. So after, is that right? Post? Yeah, after the due date, I thought, oh, that may happen because the baby may never decide to come, or my body may never decide to be ready to go, and I might need to have an induction. But I hadn't thought about an induction early, because throughout the pregnancy everything had gone smoothly, so I was going, yep, sure, that's fine. But the Wednesday before my due date I went in for a normal checkup, and they actually measured that the baby was smaller than what they'd expected based on all the previous measurements that they've done and how much it was growing and tracking, and it wasn't where they thought it was supposed to be. Now I'm saying it because we didn't know at this stage that Miles was a boy, so a lot of pregnancy stuff in my head very much is it. The midwife then booked me in for an ultrasound at lunchtime, so I hung around at the hospital for a bit and went down to get an ultrasound to see whether what size the baby was, though it is worth noting that ultrasounds at this term are not very reliable. There's lots of different factors that you need to look at as well. But we went down and had a look, because in the ultrasound, as well as doing like measurements that aren't the accurate thing, they can also see how much amniotic fluid you've still got, and they can also measure the umbilical cord to see whether that sounds healthy. So we did all that. We also wanted to do a CTG, which is where they hook up me to this machine that just has these belts on it that go over my stomach, and they measure the uterus activity and the baby's heart rate to see how it interacts with tightenings or like little mini Braxton Hicks contractions that I may be getting, and see how the baby responds to that to see if it's healthy or not, and then get the obstetrician to talk to me/us, me and Daniel, about what they thought. I was a bit late on ringing Daniel to let him know that this was all happening because he was still at work at this stage. I thought that there was going to be time before the obstetricians were coming to talk to me. I thought that they were going to do all the testings and then come and talk to me, but as it happened, they did the ultrasound, got the results for that, then talked to me, and then went, well, we'll look at the CTG afterwards. It was a bit confronting to kind of discuss all of this stuff without Daniel being there as well. I still sort of get a bit of a sense, which I think a lot of people do, that you never really feel like an adult and it's nice, if possible, to have someone there just to listen and ask questions as well, and to be like your support. So that was really hard, especially with the induction talk as well, because I was really quite scared of being induced. I'd heard that it was a lot more painful. I was worried about how I was going to deal with the pain. I thought that if I was going to get induced, then I would definitely want to get an epidural, which I didn't want to get. I don't want to say that there's any shame in women getting epidurals if they need to. It's just personally I didn't want to. I wanted to try as much as I could not to. A little bit afraid of like the needles, and like, to be honest, really afraid of getting a catheter, even though I know that the epidural just cuts out all the pain if it's successful. I just really didn't want it, and I knew that it would also lead to probably being stuck in bed and pushing in bed, which I really didn't want either. I wanted to be sort of upright and moving and everything like that. So no shame to anybody that ends up getting one or wants to get one. It's personal choice, but I'm talking about my birth story, so it's all, you know, my thoughts and opinions and things like that. I went home and I've got to back up a little bit. So obstetricians talked to me using the ultrasound as their information. And what they sort of said to me is that your baby is looking smaller, this isn't good, we would like to start the induction process tomorrow for you, where they would give me a medication called Cervidil, more commonly known as the tape, that they would insert behind or near or something in my cervix, leave that in overnight, and then the next day is when they would then give me the drip for inductions if proper contractions haven't started then. Went home and it was like really hard to sort of process all this. I had a bit of a cry in the parking lot on the way to the car, and then I had a cry driving home, and then I had a cry to Daniel as well. It surprised me, I guess, the strength of the emotions that I felt, and it made me really realize that, yeah, I'd done all this work about not having a set birth plan, but I had not thought about and being open to things that were going to happen, but I hadn't thought that I would ever get induced before my due date. I thought it was going to be afterwards, and then I could kind of deal with the feelings then. Daniel was really great support with that, and he was sort of wanting to ask more questions as well. It's always a bit of Chinese whispers, which is why it's good to have another person with any consultations as well. But his questions were kind of like, well, they've said that it's bad for the baby, but why? Like, what? Just trying to find like that balance between, so there's one indication that's not always accurate, that the baby's looking small, but there are also all these other things that it's looking good. I'd also had the CTG at that point that had measured the baby's heart rate against my uterine activity, and everything looked okay with that. The fluid looked okay. Like, there was 5 other indicators, and it was only like 1 out of 5 that things looked bad. It's hard to kind of strike that balance between wanting the baby to be safe and wanting to trust these medical people, but also not wanting to get this procedure done to me that can increase all of these risks and the cascade of intervention, even though we are so lucky that we have these interventions available when they're needed. They booked the induction, but I rang up that evening after I talked to Daniel, and I just talked to one of the midwives. I didn't know if I could talk to her or not, and she said, yeah, of course, go for it. And I just said that I was a bit hesitant about being induced, and I just wanted more information, and I know that they'd booked me in. And she said, no, it's fine, still come in anyways. You can always say no, which is like one of those things where it's like, well, duh, of course I can always say no because it's my body. But that's another thing that's really hard, that needs to get drilled in a bit more, that it is like our bodies, as well as trying to like, it's such a nuanced conversation at the moment, especially with all like the COVID vaccination things and stuff like that, because it is your body, but you haven't gone to university to study this. But most people haven't gone to study what's going to happen. I don't have a medical degree. I'm not a midwife. I don't know. This is only like research that I've done from, albeit, yes, good sources on the internet, but I'm not a medical professional or anything like that. So it's more, I think from my perspective, it's more about asking the questions so you feel like you have all the information that you need. And because the consultation had kind of happened, and all of a sudden with just me, no Daniel there to kind of like help support me with my body, and then also to the decision for our baby. And I just was not in the, I guess, the right frame of mind after hearing that I needed to be induced to then ask questions. So we just wanted to talk about it more, and the midwife that I talked to was really great. She said, just come in anyways tomorrow afternoon, ask as many questions as you want. They might not even, you know, we're in a small country hospital, so depending on how busy it is, it might not even happen. So we come in, and exactly that happened that afternoon. They were too busy. They had these other emergencies happen, and they said, look, we can't do this, but I also understand that you have a bit of reservations. We were only able to talk to one of the midwives there. That also told us a bit more key information as well, because we were sort of going, well, okay, so if you got, like, they're concerned, but it's getting pushed down the line. Like, obviously I know in the medical profession that you need to deal with the most urgent things first, because it's life or death matters. And she said, yes, exactly that. That does tell you something, because if it was so urgent that you guys, that they were so worried about getting things started this afternoon, we would offer to transfer you to another hospital, which they weren't doing. We came in the next day, same sort of thing. We asked us whether we could speak to an obstetrician, depending obviously on like how busy they were and whether they could fit us in, that kind of thing. I also wanted to request a stretch and sweep as well. We were thinking as well that if all the other indications were looking okay, and they'd also mentioned about monitoring, where they were, if we'd said no to the induction, they said we'll come in and get monitored every day. So he said, can we get monitored every day? Come in over the weekend, I'll get a stretch and sweep, and then if nothing has happened, my labour hasn't started Monday evening, then we'll start the induction process. We wondered whether we could do that because that Saturday was going to be my due date. I was going to get past my due date. I guess that mental thing for me was going to go past. So we talked to a lovely obstetrician who ended up being a locum over the weekend, which we really loved her. So we talked to her about all of this, and she actually explained a bit more what they meant about the bub being small, in that apparently babies have this like amazing ability where if they're not getting all the nutrients that they need from the placenta, they can actually stop other parts of their body growing and just continue to grow their head, or default they're getting all the nutrients to their head and the rest just goes to the rest of their body so it doesn't grow as quickly, so that they don't get brain damage. And the baby's head was measuring, I think like overall the baby was measuring like 12 out of 100, but its stomach was measuring 6 out of 100, and when it's under 10, that's when they start to worry. So they were indicating that the stomach looked smaller than the rest of the body, and it's also under this 10 number. That's when they were a bit worried that my placenta wasn't giving it everything that it needed, even though all the other signs looked good. And so the locum was really happy with my plan. That's what she said. She said, like, obviously it's up to you guys what you decide to do, but I think that's a good plan. Baby looks healthy. Come in, continue to do a daily monitoring of the CTG, of the heartbeat against the uterine activity, and if it looks okay, then you know, you keep going until Monday. But she did say that she recommended drawing a line in the sand, because the longer we wait, the increased risk that the baby would get sick, and then the baby is not going to handle labour very well being sick. That's what we ended up deciding, which was really good, and it kind of was the happy medium where I was going, come on, let's kickstart natural labour, but if the induction had to happen, it was okay. And we sort of felt like together that we were making the right decision for me and the baby and balancing that. So over the weekend I did some curb walking, which is where you walk with one foot up the gutter and one foot down to try and bounce the baby onto sort of your cervix and get things going. And I also bounced some exercise ball. Didn't eat spicy food or like some of the other, I don't really think that these things, how do you know? I mean, how do you know? So we tried all the things to sort of get things going, and it didn't, and that, you know, that's fine. So come Monday afternoon, I checked into the hospital. Everything was going sweet to get me going. No other emergencies. They gave me the Cervigyl on my cervix, which was really weird. Felt like a lot of pressure when I was standing up. It was like very bizarre, but then I'd sit down and it was fine. Had a couple of Braxton Hicks contractions, nothing eventuated. Sometimes if you're right at the right spot, it'll start your labour that way. Not for me though. So come the Tuesday morning, off we marched to the birthing suite because we'd stayed in just one of the recovery rooms afterwards. I felt like I was marching off to war because I was still so scared of the pain of an induction, because what they'd sort of explained and what I'd kind of read as well is that in normal labour you get the rise of sort of oxytocin and stuff that start the contractions, but then because it's the natural oxytocin, you then get a hit of endorphins as well with it, which kind of takes the peak off the pain. That doesn't happen in an induction because it's a fake, I think it's like Synetin or something like that. It's a fake oxytocin hormone that they give you, and you don't get the endorphin hit with it. So it can be quite hard, but the important thing to say as well is that some people love their inductions as well. They enjoyed it better than natural labour. They didn't have an issue. It was fine. I was just really scared because I'd heard a lot of stories of people where the pain was just so much more intense and it was horrible. We did talk about this, how nervous I was when they were doing my blood pressure because it was looking a bit high. They needed to do a vaginal exam first to see if my cervix was ready to try and break my waters and everything like that. And they suggested that while they were doing that, I have a suck on the gas if I was nervous. That was really good. really liked the gas. Yeah, it gets you to breathe properly, and I had enough of a hit that I was a little bit like, I guess, high off it. Not that your high lasts very long. That was interesting. Never been high before, so that was yeah, that was an interesting feeling, and it was really good that I did because it took all the pain away of the exam. And the poor midwife had trouble trying to break my waters, and they couldn't. So poor little Miles had a few scratches on his head because they get like it looks like a knitting hook, and just try and get them broken, and she was scratching trying to, and it just didn't happen. They don't actually know when they broke. That was a bit of a mystery. I felt a lot better after that, and when I sort of came into it again from the gas after the exam had done, before they'd started me on the drip, because I knew that the gas was going to work, and I was like, sweet, I'm good. I'll just stuck on this if all my natural things don't work. I was also really disappointed about being inducted, because when they induce you in this hospital, but I think pretty standard in New South Wales and Australia, they then hook you up to a CTG machine, because now they're artificially creating your labor. They want to record the baby's heartbeat all the time so that they know if something is going to happen, if the baby starts to not respond to it well, because it's not a natural process anymore. And the cordless ones were not working, so I couldn't have a shower or a bath, which is what I really wanted to do if labor had proceeded naturally. So I was really bummed about that as well, and I didn't know how the gas was going to go. I've never had it before. Some people get sick, some people say it doesn't work, so I was feeling really nervous about pain relief at this point, because I still didn't want the epidural, and I knew in myself that when I'm sick, showers or baths are really good for me. So I was really hoping and counting on that, and then to be told, no, you can't do that, yeah, sort of really sucked. Once I'd had the gas for the vaginal exam, I was good to go. It was great. I highly recommend it. If you can stand it, give it a go. I was feeling a lot better at that point, and they hooked me up to the drip, though I'm not gonna lie, it was scary watching them, because they would control how much of the drip they gave me in a period of time or whatever, and to begin with it was only small, but it was really scary watching them put it up each time, because I was like, okay, now it's gonna get worse. But overall it wasn't that bad. I was bouncing on an exercise ball, which was amazing, because I didn't want to be in bed. Lying in bed felt like shit, and standing up would have been really tiring. So bouncing on the exercise ball felt really good. I had a comb in my fist for acupressure. There's some acupressure points here that you can squeeze onto, and it just felt nice to squeeze something while I'm going through the contractions. Probably saved Daniel's hand or arm or something. All of those natural methods were really great to begin with. That was cool. I was feeling good. I did have a bit of a chuck up, which is good, because apparently that was my body sort of getting into it. And I wondered if my waters broke at that stage, because while I was chucking up, I weed everywhere as well. Sorry for TMI, but I'm not really sorry, because we need to talk about this kind of stuff as well. Maybe my waters broke then. I don't really know. I'm not sure. It's still a mystery when they broke. As the contractions got more intense though, those things weren't working. I was still squeezing my comb, but that's when I grabbed the gas. I kind of forgot that it was there, which is why it's really good to have support people, because I remember I was like kind of freaking out a bit to Daniel, and he was like, do you want the gas? Have the gas. So that was really good. It only takes the edge off though. It doesn't, or kind of, I guess, gave me something to do, took the edge off and gave me something to do when the contractions happened. And one of the midwives actually that was overseeing me, she said that she really likes getting people to use the gas, because it gets them to breathe properly, because you've got to kind of breathe like you're in like a scuba diver mask, like really heavy in and out to actually get the stuff going. And luckily in these particular gas machines that they use in the hospital, there's a rattle that you can hear, so you know whether you're doing it properly or not. And she says that's really good, because breathing opens up everything. Hey guys, editing or post video Joe here. I just wanted to explain something a bit better that I didn't, and also show you guys little Miles. Get you look like dead baby. What are you doing? Eh? He's just looking at me at the moment. I'll see if I can get a better angle in a sec. Yeah, you little cutie. I wanted to explain the gas a bit better. Maybe if I turn the light on and sit down. I should have done this with a stand, but anyways. Hey, you got little Miles? Hey? That better? Sleepy baby, but yeah. That's better. Because I do believe that these birth stories, although they're like deeply personal to each person, and the woman or the person doing them are not medical professionals generally, they are still quite educational to people who are about to have kids or afterwards and things like that. So I just wanted to explain that the gas, there's a couple of different ways that you can use it. So when I was using it in the beginning, when I was first talking about it in the vaginal exams, I was just sucking on it constantly. So then I got high for a little bit off it. But when you're in labour and you're using it to help with your contractions, what they actually got me to do just at this hospital was I would suck on it for the entire contraction, breaths in and out, in and out, in and out, and then I would hop off it when the contraction stopped. So during contractions on labour, I wasn't actually getting like constantly high all the time. That was the really good thing about the gas, that I was able to stay conscious. So I wasn't out of it, I wasn't drugged up or anything. It didn't really do a lot for the pain, to be honest. But it just took the edge off. It gave me something to focus on, something to do during the contractions. Hello. Instead of just having nothing and just tensing up. And again, like I said, the breathing thing is really good. So I wasn't like tripping the entire time, which was really good because I wanted to be conscious for what was happening. I didn't want to be out of it. I think I'm pretty sure towards the end, when the contractions were really intense, they turned up the volume on the gas, and I remember the midwife telling Daniel to turn up like just the volume on it, the lever. Hello. You're nearly ready for another nap, so I can have some brekkie. Hey? Yeah? Oh, he's a gorgeous baby. He's got beautiful blue eyes, which I wasn't sure if we were gonna... Daniel has brown eyes, and I'd always remembered that brown eyes is a higher probability than blue, but I don't know if that's super scientific accurate, so I'm really happy that he's got blue eyes. So obviously you would have been gorgeous with any eyes, wouldn't you? Oh, and here's Cooper. Come up, come up, come on. Because we can't forget about gentle. No licking face. Good boy. Coop's been really good as well. He's been so good. The only thing you have to watch with him is, I thought that I was going to have to anyways, is that he walks across anything and everyone, and so we'll like step on people walking across to get to the couch, and he went to step on Miles the other day. So still, and I mean, all dogs should be supervised with kids anyway, so still has to be supervised, but there's no aggression, which I was a bit he's not going to look at the camera because I'm shining a light using my phone, and so he's going to be triggered by it. I better go pay some more attention to you, hey? And just like a lot of social media, I'm not sure how much I'm going to have Miles in stuff. Like, we are posting some things, but just not all the time. Just sort of being sensitive with the fact that he's a human that doesn't really have any say as to what is being put on social media. And even when he is at a age where he can kind of say yes or no, he's still not really going to understand the implications. So we're going to put a few things on, but not a lot. So that's why you've already seen some stuff, but he's probably not going to be in every video. I just wanted to explain the gas a bit better, and I will put in the rest of the video then. I really wanted to do this technique called horse's breath as well. Have a Google. It apparently works for a lot of people. Didn't work for me. Breathing is very important because you want your body to open up and for everything to happen and things like that. If you're tensed up, it's just going to make it worse. But using horse's breath didn't work for me because I couldn't get it properly going. Like horse's breath, I'll demonstrate so you guys know what I'm talking about, but it's like you go and you do that, and that kind of like relaxes everything because your vocal cords are also connected to your pelvic floor, which is what is, you know, the baby is coming out through, getting pushed through. But I couldn't keep the thing, I couldn't keep my lips going properly. It was just too hard. But I'd say have a practice for yourself if you are into breathing in birth, because a lot of people recommend this. It just didn't work for me. They did let me go in the shower at one stage because baby was handling everything really well so far, and they decided that I could take off the CTG. They were happy with baby's vitals. In hindsight, I really probably didn't need the shower. I don't know whether it did help get things going though, because I got off the exercise ball and had to walk into the shower, and then after that to spoil things a little bit, I needed to push at that stage way sooner than what they thought. They'd started the contractions for me at about 8:30, and they were still thinking that I potentially could have been there at like 7 o'clock that night. But this was all like around lunchtime that this was happening. They were really happy for me to hop in the shower. They knew that that was what I'd wanted to do. But the gas was over there and the shower was over here, and I had a contraction on the way to the shower, and that was really bad. I think I got in the shower first because that was quicker, and had a contraction in the shower. It wasn't too bad, but I can't really remember. If Daniel was sitting here, he could correct you for me. It's written down on my computer elsewhere, but I don't have it here. So anyways, it doesn't, you guys wouldn't know anyways if I'm telling it out of the wrong order. But I either had a contraction on the way to the shower or on the way back, and I had nothing. Maybe my comb, but aside from that, there was nothing, and that was horrible. And that's when I had a bit of my like, I can't do this moment with Daniel, and he was really good. Like I had done a lot of like talking to him. We'd done a lot of talking about how he was going to support me. And there's this really awesome woman. Her name is Bernadette, or Beef. She's from Core and Floor Restore. Check her out. She's really good at all of this stuff. She's a trained midwife, but she also has her own programs and stuff like that. But you can check out her Instagram. It's free. Lots of good information on there. And she talks about in her free antenatal classes on YouTube, so if you want a free one to look at for more information, she talks about how the support person is the most important person in the room, which her way of explaining it is to say that they are going to get you through. Like, you're there birthing, trying to do your thing, but the support person has to know like what pain relief you want, what interventions you want, how to support you best, all this kind of stuff. Because when you have your, they call it transition, but when you have your I can't do this moment, the support person needs to say yes you can, or whatever it is that you've told them. So Daniel and I had like lots of conversations about what I wanted and how I wanted him to support me. So he did a really good job. If you're watching this, Daniel, good job. I'm feeling, you did excellent. Still don't know whether I should really need the shower or not after I discovered the gas, and because I had to do that one or two contractions without anything except maybe my comb, which was more like, something nice to hold on to than actual proper pain relief. But I made it back there, and it was funny because he was trying to dry me off, and I'm like, I don't care, just get me back to the gas and then you can get me dressed again, or get me dry again. But at that point when I was walking back, I really felt like I needed to push. I was feeling that, and then the sensation of needing to push moved into my bum, which is when generally like the baby's ready. They were a bit shocked because this was at lunchtime again, as I said. They weren't expecting things to kind of happen. They wanted to do an exam to see how many, another vaginal exam to see how dilated my cervix was. I didn't want to get on the bed because that just wasn't going to be good. They tried to pop the CTG back on me to see how the baby was doing, and they couldn't get a proper trace on it. This is when things kind of kicked up a little bit into high gear. It was either they couldn't get it positioned properly, or it was too close to my pulse or something like that, so it wasn't accurate. So they started to worry about the baby a little bit. The midwife said push if you feel like you want to push. They called up all the obstetricians, which of course I wasn't super aware of this at this point. Daniel knew what was going on, tried to stay out of the way, as there was like, I think he said there was like 10 or 15 people come into the room. Admittedly, it sounds very dramatic, there was people in training that were coming in to have a look, which I'd said that didn't bother me, that was cool. But Daniel said that it was really kind of chaotic for him because he was trying to like, where do I stand? And they said, look, you have to get up onto the bed. We can't find the baby's heart rate. So like, they helped me up. And this is like where all the things as well happened that I didn't want to happen, because I didn't want to push in the bed. I didn't want to be up in stirrups or anything like that. But they had to attach this little screw into the top of the baby's head so that they could get a read on its heartbeat straight away. Found out then that it was dropping really quickly. and he wasn't coming out quick enough. Then they gave me episiotomy and used forceps, which two things that I really didn't want to happen, but it was fine when it was happening. They gave me the local anesthetic so that I couldn't feel the episiotomy, and I really liked the obstetrician. Even though I hadn't met him before, I really liked him. I felt that his instructions were really good, and he told me what he was doing. I remember it because he said, okay, I'm gonna put one of the forceps in and then the other one in, and so I remember all that. Didn't feel it, great, excellent, like all those painkillers. And yeah, he coached me on how to push as well, which is something that I didn't necessarily want to have coach pushing, and I didn't want to push on my back because I'd read about breathing your baby out and the fetal ejection reflex, but it's really hard to get the fetal ejection reflex. You have to not push yourself. It's kind of like how if you're going to the toilet to do a poo and you're forcing it out, that's the pushing that they tell you to do in most hospital settings. It's called purple pushing apparently. And I didn't want to do that because I don't know whether, like, you know, you should try it yourself. If you actually need to go to the toilet and sometimes you just can't stop it and it just happens, that is also what can happen to your uterus. I'm not a doctor. I don't know all this, you know, whether it continues to happen for everybody. Maybe the baby wouldn't have come out anyways. Heart rate was dropping. They needed to get it out. That's why they used the forceps, because they just needed to get him out straight away. I didn't want that to happen, but it was fine. It was, you know, like I said, I really liked the obstetrician. He coached me through it. I wanted to scream while I was pushing, and he said that I was wasting energy, and you know, we need to get the baby out, so I had to push without screaming or making much noise, which was hard, but we did it. And then they pulled him out and put him on my chest, and I was a bit like, oh, there is actually a baby in here. It's a bit of like shocking, I guess. Even, you know, just one of those funny things. And Daniel got to cut the cord, and he got to have a look, I think, first, and saw that he was a boy. And yeah, so he was born. That's it. And then I sort of stayed in the stirrups while they stitched me up for a long time. I had the episiotomy cut that they had to do, and then I had a couple more tears. Breastfeeding was really hard to begin with because poor little Miles had a bump on his head. So I think, based on what people have told me, and Daniel's told me, and the obstetricians and research and stuff, they use the forceps because his heart rate was dropping, but forceps can sometimes cause babies to get stuck, and he got stuck, and so he has a little bump, quite a big bump on his head actually, called a hematoma. It's all fine though. It wasn't across his platelets or whatever in his skull. It's going to go down by 6 weeks. It's still kind of there, but his head was really sore afterward, and I assume his neck was probably a bit sore from getting yanked out too. So breastfeeding was really hard to begin with because he just was not interested. After a couple of days, I ended up having a bit of a cry to one of the midwives, and she got him some Panadol for his poor little head. And then another midwife helped us. I can't remember whether it was before or after this happened, but she helped us as well. And she has a bit of a knack for getting difficult babies to latch on. But I think also because he'd had the Panadol, given his poor little head a chance to like heal, he'd had enough sleep, he was ready. So he's feeding all good now, hitting all his milestones and everything like that, and it's all fine. We had a bit of trouble trying to decide what to call him. His name almost was Jasper, which is still a nice name, but it just didn't sound right. And we were saying throughout the entire pregnancy, I don't know what are we going to do if he's a boy? Like, boys are so hard to name. And yeah, just did not know what to call him, and he ended up being a boy. And we'd talked about Miles like bloody years ago. It had come up in one of those conversations that you have about names if you're thinking, you know, oh, there he's crying, he's waking up. I wonder if he'll go back to sleep. We talked about names, and Miles had come up like years ago, years ago, but you know, that was all fantasy land then. And then we talked about it a couple of weeks before I had him, or we had him. And I was like, no, I don't want to do alliteration because our surname starts with an M as well. I don't want to, like, you know, that's just like, nah, let's not do that. So we're back to the drawing board, trying to think, just couldn't come up with anything. Daniel still really liked Miles. We actually thought that we'd named him Jasper, but I was still kind of like, I don't know. And like, I think Daniel was more just like, I want to just name this kid because it was like 24 hours or more after he'd been born and you still didn't have a name. But nothing was sounding right. And then Daniel mentioned Miles again, and obviously it sounded perfect. Everyone finds it funny because he's Miles Neville and our surname is M, and so Eminem, um, which is funny. But anyways, I'm gonna go. I don't think he's hungry because he's been fed, but you never know. So we'll go. I'll go see him. But yeah, thanks everybody so much for watching this. Sorry that it's a bit long, but I just wanted to tell it in its entirety. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you guys soon in another video. Bye.